Vince
Vince,
McMahon.
yeah. He paid $400 million and sold
Vince
it to
McMahon.
Vince McMahon. Yes.
He should have given it to his wife as a gift, and she'd be like, "Oh, honey, another one, like another
Egg
major
McMuffin.
sports franchise."
You shouldn't
Okay,
have.
I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks, honey.
West Coast. Does it feel weird? Like, I don't know. It feels weird to me. I feel like this is like way in my afternoon, and some people's not even had lunch yet.
Yeah.
Does it feel weird to you?
Well, I'm sure it feels weird.
Backpack Show. I win. I saw that. I saw that rush through.
I think it's awkward for people on Pacific time watching the show at like their 7 a.m.
They're 7 a.m. I know
Or
it.
6 a.m., 7 a.m.
I know it. We're not going to have that trouble today, though. I mean, we have like go-getters. Vern Tejas, Joe Terry.
They make me feel lazy.
Former pro football players, CEOs of companies now.
This is dumb. I need to book people that make me feel better about my life choices.
That's right.
No worse.
Slugs. Is Jabba the Hutt available?
I'm going to look into it. So Mike O'Callahan said, "Go Vern, social climbing, show him a thing or two." And apparently Mike is running for mayor of Portland. So good
Oregon,
luck,
by
Mike.
The way, those of us from Maine.
Oh, John Harrison laughs because Chris cut me off again, which is one of his signature moves.
That's all I got. Welcome to the Backpack Show. That was an intro, right? Okay, good. How do we decide we're doing this? Is it Vern first? I don't know. I didn't do any prep.
Let's
do it. Let's grab Vern.
Let's do it.
And I also didn't get any prepping. It is Tejas. Am I saying it right? Or
that is correct. It's a Spanish J. Sounds like an H.
It's a good Irish name, that, Vern. Vern, of all the different things you can choose to do, climbing all 7 major peaks seems like I don't know. Like there should have been some other thing you should have said you want to do instead, like just run a dumb marathon and get it over with. Like why that goal, or what makes the difference between you and the people who just one's good? I got one.
I think for me, I'm a slow learner. It really is great to go back and improve each time. But I'm also a mountain guide, and as doing that as my profession, there's a certain amount of repetition. You want to be on mountains that you know, so you can actually enhance your people's trip. You know, give them some experience. So.
Nobody wants to go with a guide on their first trip up.
Believe it or not.
Cool, I got this.
Every time you're out there on a new mountain, you feel a little out of water. But that's the way it goes.
But how did you choose to do this professionally? Because you were very young, and you're like, I think climbing would be cool, so I'm just going to go start doing it now.
Well, I think being this kind of personality, I like challenge. I like audacious challenge, and mountains certainly give me that. My third day in the state of Alaska, on what in Texas, where I grew up, would have been a very hot day, August the 2nd. It snowed on me, and I was climbing a hill, just a foothill in the Alaska range, and I got hypothermic and almost died. And right then and there, I knew this is something I wanted to do more of.
I love that sentence. So I almost died, so I knew that's what I should do.
Well, I realized how much I had to learn. So it actually kind of threw the gauntlet down and really woke me up as to, wow, I don't know anything about the outdoors, especially the Alaskan outdoors. So the next day I saw Denali, Mount McKinley, if you will, in all of its glory, unveiled to myself and my climbing buddy. And both of us were so awestruck that it set the hook for the rest of my life.
Thinking you must have dated some interesting people. Like, this is horrible. I do more of this. More pain.
Well, it's part of the fun.
What are your tips for dealing with altitude? John Harrison is in the comments asking, saying he had his butt kicked in Peru at Laguna 69.
That is an excellent question, John. Altitude is adapting, and you have to spend time to get adapted. So you either have to spend it on smaller mountains in different locations, or if you're like going to Everest, you have to spend time there. 45 days of the 60-day climb is just getting acclimatized. There are ways to do it in town. You've got chambers that basically you add nitrogen to and get rid of the oxygen, and you sleep in those or exercise in those. It's what we call hypoxic training. Many athletes do it, Olympians, big professional sports people do it. And you can actually build up red blood cells so that when you go to altitude later, you will actually be pre-acclimatized, and it means you can climb faster. But otherwise, you need to go slow and let your body adapt.
Climbing is an interesting sport because there's all the technical skill that you need to have. There's so much understanding of like the difference between what legs do, what arms do, and all that. But then there's also the what you were just talking about, conditioning stuff and all the kind of prep work you need there. And then you need a massive amount of mental toughness, resilience, and problem solving in a variety of circumstances. In a way, it's a lot like training to be an elite military person. What was your path to that? And where did it go from the distance between just doing it and kind of winging it to I've really got to become a student of this work?
Well, I think that initial wake up when I almost died of hypothermia made me aware that I needed to learn a lot. I decided the next day when I saw Denali that I wanted to climb it. And then I spent 5 years living in Alaska, several years in a tent during the wintertime too, just trying to learn about the winter, the avalanche conditions, the glaciers, crevasses, frostbite, hypothermia, and basically working in apprenticeship kind of positions with mentors, people who had been in the wilderness, people who had done great things in the mountains, in the backcountry of Alaska. I would just latch onto them and try to get as much knowledge as possible. Anything that they could give me was more than I had coming from Texas.
My presumption is that your experience with this, of course, translates to a lot of different places. How long between Vern, the guy just climbing these things for a challenge, to Vern, the wisdom provider in other verticals and other spaces?
After I decided I was going to climb Denali, it took me 5 years really of just climbing every weekend that I had. I mean, just, and during the week sometimes I would, 5 years of apprentice, 5 years of getting out and doing it, working with the Alaska Mountaineering Club, working with the Alaska Mountain Rescue Group. I learned a lot. I learned from teachers originally, then peers, and then I started gaining enough knowledge and experience on my own that then they asked me to be leaders. So it was very organic. And then fortunately, a place opened up on a friend's trip. He was a mountain guide on Denali, and he asked if I wanted to fill the vacancy for half price. And of course, I was like, yeah, sure, I'd love to. And that made me aware that I could climb it, and I did climb it. And then I had knowledge that most people didn't have. And so 2 weeks later, he says, look, I've got two climbers that would like to go up there, but I don't want to do it. It's not a big enough trip for me, but you might want to do it. So I went from being a client to the next 2 weeks later going back up on Denali as a trip leader. So it was kind of like out of the frying pan into the fire, but that made me have to get resourceful very quickly, and the rest is history.
Your brother says you were always a wisdom provider. I think that's very nice. My brother would say nothing so positive about me.
I was thinking the same thing. My brother doesn't like me at all. He's never even showed up to our stupid video.
Well,
interesting.
I'm happy he's on my watching right now. That's great. Thank you very much.
It's got to be true that Philip does something like nothing to do with climbing very large pieces of rock. Is that true? Like he's like a landlubber like the rest of us?
Well, he is
finance.
He's a scientist. He's a geologist. So he does things with rocks.
Son of a gun.
Not big rock like the mountains that I do.
Little rocks.
But because he's involved with geology, there's a lot of crossover, and I really enjoy picking his brain every time I get a chance about what's going on geomorphically. And
that's a big word for us here, Vern.
Okay, in the dirt.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Subsurface.
Thank
So
you,
Philip
sir.
tells us.
But so what was that like when you, at a young age, decide to leave Texas and you end up in Alaska climbing mountains? Was your family like, honey, please come home? Like, what was that like?
That's a good question. I think they were happy to get rid of me, actually. Uh, I was a lot of trouble, especially as a youngster. But so I basically headed out at an early age and traveled around the country on my thumb and ended up ultimately in Alaska and found not only an environment that I found challenging, but the people were amazing. Everybody who lives up there seems to have a story and are unique characters. It's such a challenging place that you're not a resident unless you really like a hard lifestyle. And because of that, I met some amazing people. And
Decided to stay. I think maybe Vern has
I think
frozen.
we lost Vern again.
Well, let's bring Joe in. How about that?
We can do that sort of thing. By the way, I wanted to point out one little detail. I don't know if anyone can see it closely enough, but Philip absolutely has a geologist's beard in that Facebook picture.
Is that
It's,
required to qualify, like to get the title? Because
I think that rivals
it would
my
take me a
dad's
while.
beard there. So
Oh, there's
there we
Vern.
go. Get Vern back.
Oh,
Nope.
no, stop hitting buttons.
Those ones are my buttons.
okay.
Welcome back, Vern. Was your wife streaming something again?
I think she was on Amazon.
So what actually, I was interested to know kind of what the lifestyle is like. So you've got guitars behind you. I know you play. Do you ever bring the guitar like up the mountain with you? What are you taking up the mountain with you?
I'm glad you asked that. Actually, I'm the first and probably the only person to play a guitar on top of the highest point on each continent.
Wow.
So I love to take my guitars in the field with me. If we're on the lower angles, if we're approaching the mountain on the trek in, I'll be strumming it as we play. And
That's
it's
ambitious.
well,
So let's see.
it's
Rocky Mountain High.
yes, of course.
Trying to think what other kind of songs we get up there. Going Down the Mountain by Jane's Addiction. Coming Down
Should
the
be
Mountain.
coming around the mountain.
Coming around the mountain. There's a lot of navigation.
Yes.
I'm still thinking I'd bring like a kazoo or harmonica or something.
Oh, that I do. I actually, my brother, who's been on a couple of times already, taught me how to play harmonica when in my teens, and that's my first love. And then because I love it so much and play it so much, I decided I could do other things. But guitar and harmonica go very well together.
I was thinking mountain and harmonica go somewhat well together.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. So when I first climbed Denali, I actually carried a harmonica to the top with me. But since then, I've taken a violin and a guitar up there. So it's now a tradition to take a musical instrument wherever I go.
I just want to. I'm suddenly thinking of in different times Woody Allen movie where he was a pianist in a marching band. And he had to keep rolling his piano down the road and then stopping to play.
Yeah, you got to choose your instrument correctly for your lifestyle.
And everything he plays is double march time. That is hilarious. I was thinking that, harmonica playing on a mountain, the wheezing part you got really handy, but to actually get an actual song out, that's some work.
The harmonica is one of the better instruments to play because not only do you make sound blowing out, but also inhaling. So the back and forth is important for oxygen transfer. So if you play a lot, you actually get more oxygen. So it's not as counterintuitive. It's like you're going to run out of air up there.
Right.
You actually get more by playing. So I think that's actually lent itself to lung development and maybe a better climber.
I'm just imagining Vern Tejas, mountain rescue, and the person's like splayed out on the rocks. Are you okay? Breathe into this. Sorry, that's where my head had to go.
The experience of writing a book, Vern, you're a mountain climber. You like adventure. Writing a book is like sitting at your desk for a long time, for weeks.
Yes, so. This book has been a labor of love. It's all my stories. So if you want to hear the stories of the mountains, feel free to get this. This is on Amazon. It's called 70 Summits, which is a reference to the fact that I actually climbed the highest point on each continent, not only once, but 10 times, at least 10 times.
I had to
it's-
clarify that. Somebody was like, wait, but I think you meant 7, right? And I'm like, no, 70. And she's like,
Did I mention
what?
I'm a slow learner? So that's 10 times 7.
I mean, you'll try anything 10 times. I guess.
Yeah, well, until I find out if I like it or not.
So does that mean we can
Oh,
expect 9 more books?
That might be a stretch.
Okay.
Actually, it's easier to climb a mountain than it is to write a book. So I have a lot of respect for authors. It's a skill that I'm very novice at, and it's been a challenge to sit down long enough to get one out. But working
Chris
on
has written 9 books.
Whoa, Chris!
but
impressed.
guess how many?
Well
Guess the
done.
biggest mountain I finished. Katahdin, 1 mile. That's all you get.
Katahdin's, that's a nice mountain. I like it.
It's a
Yeah.
cute little rock for you. What's
Very
Katahdin for you? Katahdin for him is like a sandwich.
Like a speed
And,
bump.
you know,
A sandwich on
dear.
the smorgasbord of mountains.
Step over it like Superman.
However, the only other mountain story I have is I got into trail running when I decided I wanted to get into running because I figured I'm fat and it's great for going slow. And no one complains about your times as a trail runner. It's all about endurance and distance. So my half marathon on the way to my marathon was Pisgah Mountain, which is a 4,400 foot elevation, which is nothing, except it's running up and down 4,400 feet. And you learn something about your quads, about coming down mountains. Tell me the things that people don't expect versus what everyone would know if they thought about it.
Wow, what they don't
Everything, right? Everything.
I think for something like Denali, it's the weather is the bigger deal. I mean, the mountain, of course, is challenging, and the crevasses are deep, and the wind will blow you off. But just dealing with the weather takes a certain amount of just learning. I mean, you have to learn those skills or go with somebody who knows how to survive in those kind of conditions. I mean, really, the amount of self-sufficiency that you need in the mountains is like a skill that most people don't learn as a hard skill, but it's a real important skill to have, is tending to your needs so that you can be a contributing member of the team.
That's going to be an interesting question, with Joe, because team sports are a very different creature than how much weight you have to pull as a solo, even though you're with a climbing group at that point or whatever. I'm also interested in Darren's question. I'm not touching this button. Vern, how did you train for your winter solo of Denali?
Well, that's a good question, Darren. I actually guided Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in South America, right before I went, but also spent several years living outdoors in Alaska in a tent, as I mentioned earlier. But also on top of that, there was some nights I would test gear at 20 below up in Fairbanks, where I'd actually just sleep out without a sleeping bag, without a tent, just in the clothes that I wanted to be able to test to see if I could survive in them. And it was certainly made for some uncomfortable evenings, but I got lots of good feedback and learned how to live underground. If you don't have a tent, if you decide that it's too much weight, which it is in the wintertime, you need to go underground. So I practiced making snow shelters. I used them on the first winter ascent of Mount Logan, which is the highest mountain in Canada.
Wow.
And I used them several times on different expeditions before I went up Denali in the wintertime. So I had lots of background and of course, a dozen or so ascents at that point. So I knew what I was getting into. It was just a lot colder.
Vern, did you just kind of blow by the fact that you said the first winter ascent of that mountain, Mount Logan?
Yeah, I guess I did.
Just like la la la, like
yeah.
I did that.
It was that wasn't solo. It was with a group of friends. We actually made some friends on it. Wait, you made friends? Well, three of us decided we were going to do it, and then we heard there was another team from Anchorage who was also planning to do it. And that was like, how can this be that no one's tried it in the winter ever, and now two teams from the same city are trying? So we found out who it was, and we invited them over. We were going to rough them up a bit, but they turned out to be pretty good guys, and we joined forces, and together, all 6 of us made the summit, and it was the first
Return the ring to Mordor.
It was the first winter ascent of Logan, which
wow,
whereas actually we did a lot of that testing of the Ranger Trench, which is that snow shelter built underground. And that proved to be very valuable information for then doing Denali without a tent in the wintertime.
So the only thing I have to even vaguely compare to that is I worked for the phone company for a while, and I did my well, you'll get there. I did my pole climbing school in January out in Western Massachusetts, Worcester, Mass area, Marlborough, and there was a big snowstorm right before we were going to do all our pole climbing. And in pole climbing, it's a belt and gaffer spikes on your boots, and that's all
Absolutely.
you get, a boot and belt. And it's only 22 feet, which is nothing. 22 feet doesn't even sound like height until all you have is like about an 8-inch pole and a gaffer thing. And so and what they do, which I thought was a little strange in their way of teaching, they didn't say, you should probably put your belt on this side of the pole and you should put your gaffs on this side of the pole. So I saw all this ice. This is how you know I'm not a mountain climber. I said, I'll put my belt against the ice because then my boots and the gaffs will have really good contact with the dry wood. The belt will not. So I got my belt up high, got my gaffs just right. The belt on the ice goes whoosh about 2.5 feet. And then I Woody Woodpecker down the pole. And I get the most incredible splinters a human has ever had in their body multiple times. And I say, wow, I don't want to climb poles for a living. You must have stories like that aplenty from, little common sense moments. However, I also was thinking about the fact how utterly dangerous it is at the level that you're climbing most times compared to someone bouncing off a foam pole in a driveway with a bunch of people.
Well, 22 feet is a long ways to go onto hard pavement. So I appreciate what you're saying. But ice can be quite tragic if you're not careful with it. It's been the downfall of a lot of climbers. It's a wonderful thing when you figure out how to climb it. But man, if you're just sticking a leather belt around it, you can get in trouble quick.
Yikes. Vern Tejas, we can find you on Twitter. We have Alpine Ascents. If you have to go, you have permission to leave, of course, and we're grateful that you were here. But if you don't, stick around backstage, and usually we'll catch you in the latter half of this as well. Thank you so much.
I'll see you there. Thank you so much.
All right. Hang tight.
Tell your wife no streaming, Vern.
Yeah, tell it to get off Amazon. Joe, Terry, how the heck are you?
I'm doing awesome. I was more pumped up like 20 minutes ago when you were playing that music and I was like, can you just play that again? I was firing me up.
I got you. It's only like 20-ish seconds. Ready?
Backpack Show.
There you go.
I love that. Backpack
This
Show.
is a tough act to follow, Joe.
Yeah. Well, I bet, one of the things you did, before your career is running marketing props and all the other companies in your consulting group and all that was you were a professional football player. There's nothing about, lifting that doesn't have that awesome run out music and good gym mixes and that sort of thing.
Exactly.
It makes me wonder what's on your 5 a.m. playlist for lifting. What's your gym playlist like these days?
Well, we were talking about it before the show, right? And you said, what was the band that? Because that band gets me pumped up too. We were talking about the song, and you said,
music. I never talk about music. That's crazy.
I forget it. Yeah.
He usually works song lyrics into the interview somewhere, and it takes a while sometimes for people to notice. Like if they don't share his taste in music. So He'll go on for like minutes. So if that happens, I'm just going to have to let it go, Joe.
If it was during Vern's, I was just thinking of, mountain and rock songs, like Mountain Song by Jane's Addiction. Maybe that's what you were
Jane's Addiction. I love Jane's Addiction.
There
but
you go.
I do wake up to YouTube Beautiful Day. That's what my phone wakes me up to. So I love that.
That's
song.
an interesting segue, Joe, because I had a CEO who ruined that song for me. Because we had a rebranding experience and an incredible time, company forced mirth and merriment, where they replayed that song. I don't know how many times during the event, and they were using it sort of like in a sentence, and I was just like, "Come on, guys! Like we get it, beautiful day, thanks." And all of this over a new logo. Like, you know, it's the least interesting thing to roll out to an entire corporation, a logo. So that makes the turn in what is the difference? How does it come about? Not all of your sports playing brethren were meant to run companies. How did you make that change? How did you decide that? And what was that transition like? There's got to be some steps missing between, you know, pro football player and CEO.
Yeah, plenty of steps missing, but mostly scars in between that. And a couple concussions to go along. So if I pause for a second, I always blame it on the concussions.
Nice.
But yeah, you know, what you learn, the steps you learn going through that process, playing football in high school, playing in college, playing in pro for a very short time. But to get there, right, and seeing players come and go was you just understood human potential and understood what's possible. Big, small, fast, slow, you know, whatever it was, you saw all kinds from all different backgrounds. And it created an environment where I was like, is that me doing that? I'm hearing some background.
Oh, I don't know. If it's super loud, I don't know, like a buzzing or something?
I was muted.
Oh, okay.
I think it's Vern. Let's just blame Vernon.
Okay. Let's
He's
blame
not even
Vern.
in the stream.
Yeah, he's not even in. He's not even in the studio. But seeing that environment and learning, you know, through hard work, trial and error, just learning that anything is possible, and to see the potential in people, and to see people reach that potential, sometimes not reach that potential, and understand why they didn't, taught me a lot of things, and I pulled that forward into leadership. And so now, as I sit in a leadership position, I love people. You know, I mean, I don't love people in the way that it actually exhausts me to go to big events and have to talk to a bunch of people, but I love people, and to be able to engage with people and work with people and help them find their path and help them achieve things that they never thought possible. And that pulls in to the company and helping a company achieve things they never thought possible. I love that. That's my passion.
So it was funny because my only very brief career in football got cut short freshman year for two reasons. One was a little medical scenario where my muscles were growing faster than my bones. So I'd be running downfield and almost like, remember those like stupid weightlifter things where it was like 2 handles and 3 springs? Well, if you made them slack, that's what my muscles were doing. And so the bones in my knees would grab some extra muscle and shorten everything and tear up all the back of my ligaments and stuff. It was unpleasant.
That sounds unpleasant. Yeah. Give him a yellow card. That is disgusting.
Doctor says you could play football for 1 year or you can, you know, have your legs the rest of your life. I said, well, it sounds like a good time to quit football. The other thing was, and I'll be really honest, I'm 6'2", 285. I was practically that size then too. And it's plenty of fat, but you know, on a great day, I'm going to be 6'2", 220. And I came there thinking, I really want to be defensive line. They said, you should be offensive line. And I said, that means running a lot more, right? And they're like, good, go for it. And I was like, no. And that was about the end of my interest in the career, because I felt like if you see one of the biggest dudes on your field, wouldn't you not let him be the slow guy in defense and not make him have to run with the guys with the ball? And I felt like the coach put me in the wrong spot. So I'm asking football man and CEO man, isn't a lot of what makes a great CEO knowing the spot for your person and at least being able to communicate that spot and its value to other people?
Yeah, fabulous point. It's not actually, you know, and it's a play on words, not necessarily knowing that spot, but it's helping them see it. Because I don't want to say, hey, you should be here because of what I've observed, but over time, let's understand where your passions are and what your skills are, and let's put you in that position to win. So that is the number one job as a leader, bar none, is coaching and helping their team and serving them their team to get them in a position where they can flourish. And if you do that, game over, you know.
I know Carrie's going to have questions too, but I also got a chance to peek in on the replay of the Moneyball Billy Bean thing, which of course, being a New Englander and a Bostonian, has a little extra importance up here because we kind of got a World Series out of it, so we'll take it. And I had never read the book. I'm not a baseball guy per se, but when I saw the movie, I was smitten. I was just like this idea, this kind of mythical number, and them sort of finding on base average. Are you as obsessed with that kind of concept of sort of a mythical number? And if so, how do you help your teams find their number? Because it's different for each position, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm not obsessed with the mythical number. In that story, I just thought it was most interesting that pain forced innovation for him. So he had to look somewhere. It's not like, and what's interesting, the backstory, because Billy and I are friends, is the writer who wrote the book, Michael.
Michael.
We'll call him Michael. Carrie will figure it out.
She's fast.
Michael Lewis.
Michael Lewis. So he's done, The Blind Side. He's done all these books. He wasn't coming in to write that book about Moneyball. He was just talking to some baseball people, and he stumbled across this, because Billy wasn't like this big numbers guy. It's just he was looking, it forced him to look for an advantage, and it forced him down that path. So what I always tell my team, my view of the world is, look, once is a data point, 2 becomes interesting, and 3 starts a trend. In anything, whether it's behaviors or skills, you start to see trends, right? And saying, oh, that's interesting. Oh, that's a data point. That's interesting. That's a trend. So what I always tell my team and talk to my team about is, look, we're going to have intuition. We have to make intuitive decisions, gut feel decisions. I want to be able to validate those with some data. You know what I mean? So I'm not going to rely on the data, but as the single source, but I feel like we should be doing this. And instead of just going out and doing it, let's look at the data, whether it's an individual from a performance perspective, why we should put them in this role. Hey, I really think Carrie should be the CMO. Okay, great. That's what I feel. Let's look at some of the things that she's done. Does that data kind of support pushing her into that role? Yeah, you got to have this skill, and boy, she thinks differently about this, right? And so it's taking that intuitive nature and applying some data to it.
As an employee a long time ago in a wireless telecom, a young wireless telecom vendor, what we seemed to do a lot at our organization was kind of jury-rig the entire organizational structure around humans. So real world names, Don and Paige. Don and Paige couldn't get together, so they made 2 different teams where Don and Paige didn't have to interact. This seems like the dumbest thing in the world, and I was so grumpy at the time. I worked with both of them is the problem. And I feel like a lot of what happens in organizations, especially right before they figure out how to become a grown-up, is predicated on a lot of that. What I just heard you say was a lot more like you love to look at the numbers, you love to look at the trending and all that sort of thing. How tricky is it for you to impose that kind of structure on a company that maybe is just a little too wild west?
Yeah, so now you're talking about culture, and I think you and I exchanged some Twitter messages.
That's what got me excited to talk to you. I was really into your ideas there.
Yeah, so now it's about culture, and that goes deep into how the company operates, and is it operating in a way that can ultimately, there's a company called Partners in Leadership. They have this foundation. And it's like, look, our experiences shape our beliefs, which shape our actions, which lead to results. And it's really, really important that you look at that and say, okay, how are we operating? You know what I mean? And you know, that to me, to take a problem and say, oh, okay, the problem is we're just going to separate Dave and Steve or Susan and Nanette, right? And we're going to do this, doesn't solve the cultural foundational problem of what's going on and how you address that. So what message did you just show the rest of the organization? How many years ago was that, Chris?
Oh, that was 1999.
Yeah, so 99, and that story is still just
Vivid.
that's vivid, right? And you're like, I'm not sure that company is so good. I'm not sure that culture was a high performing culture. And did they do the right thing for the individuals and for all the people that work under them? Right? So I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. I got struck by something. And Carrie, I promise I'll let you ask some questions.
No, that's cool. I'm like Silent Bob.
So I get too excited sometimes. I switch really fast. There's a reason we have a 90-degree segue graphic, and as I switch, so you are a guy who is built to help people understand a frame, a structure, and a path to get through it, just like Vern is. Vern can't say to somebody, okay, we're at the base, but I've got to tell you what it's going to be like 6 hours up, because 6 hours up, there's a big thing coming, and I need you to think about it, even though we're only at base. I think abstract that way. But what I do is I asked you a question. You said, okay, now we're talking about culture. And it was like you had your frame over here. We were talking this. You went, hang on a minute. Here is my frame now. It was very interesting. And it speaks to how you formulate, your response to things. And looking through your resume before this and whatnot, looking through all, LinkedIn and all that, I would suggest that maybe you picked that up either through experience or through some learning, but not really through education per se. Where did you get that ability to lock a frame around the piece that you want to talk to and express?
Wow, that's a deep question. I don't even know where to start with that.
You need a graphic for deep questions.
Wow, yeah.
But you're in the Bay Area, so you have to like Metallica. It's required by law. But.
Yeah. So that's something that I've learned over time, and I'll say that I'll just do again a quick story. The quick story is this: I'm a kid. I'm 18 years old, and I learned that you should have. I read this book. I think it was what was the book? Of course, when you ask me now, I go blank, and it's all tattered and torn in my.
You've read it so many times.
Yeah. So it's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, right? And it talks about your purpose, right? And goals, like and I'm like, all right, I'll write some goals. I'm 18, and it's like, what do you think about? You think about girls, you think about sports, and you think about food, and it's like, well, I'm going to write some goals. I'm going, so I write these goals out, and they were all, of course, sports related. Like, I want to do this in my freshman year in college, and this and this, and ultimately I want to go to the NFL. And so fast forward, I'm 21, and I just got cut from the Seattle Seahawks. So guy comes into my room and he says, "Hey, Joe, coach wants to see you." Chuck Knox, right? Chuck Knox is the coach. He was a longtime coach of the Rams and the Seahawks, now passed recently. And he's walk into his office and he says, "Hey, thank you for your contribution to the team. It's like the total talk, right? And here's the contribution to the team, and we really appreciate it. But we're going to have to let you go today." And I said, "Okay, I understand that, coach, but I really want to play in the NFL. I played 3 games. I'm considered a 1-year veteran, right? I really wanted to stick in the NFL. And I said, Coach, Coach Knox, what do I got to do to stick in the NFL? And I'm expecting him to tell me this story. And he says, Terry, you're a hell of a linebacker, but you're just not good enough to be in the NFL.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. And so a couple days later, I'm at my house. I'm going through a bunch of papers, cleaning my room, going to move out of my parents' house. And I come across a piece of paper, and I don't want to get too emotional about it. And there's 5 goals. And literally all 5 of those goals happened, right? With the last one being make it to the NFL. Okay, 3 games, so what? You made it to the NFL, right? And I said, okay, there's something here. There's something here. And so I started to go deep. I was never a great student in college, but I started to go deep, and I took all of that energy from football that I had focused on for all those years to be a professional athlete. And I said, anybody can do this. Anybody can do what they want to do in life. And I got to figure it out, and I got to find my vehicle to do it. And so all my passion then went into reading every book I could and understanding everything I could, and to understand how you optimize human potential as it relates to individuals in business or athletics. And then that got me into doing Ironman and all that. And that's a whole nother story.
You mentioned human potential, seeing people achieve their maximum potential and seeing other people
Chris
not.
is actually going to let you ask a question.
For once. Because you guys can't see the back channel. I'm like, it's cool. I'm still here also. So what's the difference between the people who do achieve their maximum potential and the people who don't?
There's not a lot of difference. So let me give you a personal story again. Not a lot of difference. So in my previous role, I was the CEO of a company that we had a tremendous run, all sorts of successes, and we were about ready to sell the company. And at the 11th hour, I, for various reasons, didn't want to sell to this buyer. And I went to our current investor and I said, I'm not going to do the deal. And I played a card. I played it hard. And I said, I'm not doing the deal. And I want to do the deal with this other buyer. And these investors were like, you're putting all of our investors' money at risk. This deal was about ready to close, right? And you don't know if this other investor can close the deal and all that. And I said, yeah, but I feel better about them and I want to go there. And they said, okay, we'll back you. And it was a big to do, right? We'll back you. And so we did it. The deal ultimately with the other investor ended up closing. It was a great result for everybody, right? And I got all these accolades, and the employees of the company made all this money. And I'm at this Hall of Fame inductory ceremony for this investment group, because they're putting me in the Hall of Fame because it wonderful return and and all this stuff, right? And so I pull the who was then my chairman aside, and we're having a conversation, and he goes, you know what happened there, don't you, in that point when you pulled out of that deal? If that other deal didn't go down, I would have had to fire you. You realize that? And I said, yeah, I knew it, and I knew it was a risky move. He would have had to fire me. So look how close that was to you being totally successful or being fired. and never getting that return for those investors, never being inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's how close success and failure is. I mean, it's razor thin, and it happens every day. And so, Carrie, I'll go back to your original question. I say that story because your original question was, what's the difference in people that get to that potential and don't? It's not much.
It's not talent. It's not
And
education
it's not
or experience.
talent, and it's not, no. But it is your ability to find, and I had a conversation with somebody, just one of our employees, and she's 56, and she's saying, I'm still trying to find my passion. You know what I mean? And so it's about helping people find that purpose and that passion, where if I would have been fired, I would have been okay. I would have figured out the path again and gone on another path, because that's my passion, and that's what I feel passionate about, and that's what I feel like I'm here to do. And so if you don't have that, boy, it's really hard to pick yourself up after failure and move on. It just takes so much out of you. And so if you aren't in alignment, and that's why it's so important to help people get in alignment, because they can withstand that punishment over time.
So it's believing in yourself based on what you know to be true about yourself and your instincts and the situation.
Well,
and being willing to risk it. You're willing to get fired. You could have been wrong.
Yeah,
you could have been.
I could have been wrong. You know what I mean? But believing in yourself is one piece of it, right? But you also have to have that passion for that mission, right? And believing in yourself is important. But I wake up every day, and I'm like, okay, time to do it. And I gotta, what was it? Inspiration, it's like a shower. You need one every day. You got to be inspired every day, and you have to be on that mission, because there's chinks taken out of the armor every single day, little hits on you that you have to be able to withstand. And so believing in myself is important. That is important. I'll always bet on myself, but I better have a purpose that's higher than just me.
That's what I caught in the last part of Joe's answer, was that it was Vern saying, I saw Denali and said, I need to climb that right there. And that's the backdrop that allows you to fail, stumble, and pick up more skills along the way. Is that what I heard, Joe?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you said. Okay. I just wanted to check, because that person who said she didn't know who she wanted to be at 50 something, Carrie finished #1 in her law class. Carrie is the most professional success that I've ever known, as far
most
as
professional mute ever to host a talk show.
Shush. You didn't even intend to co-host a talk show. You were just helping, and I said, can you help me more? And you said, sure. And I said, how about co-host? And you said, sure. And that's really how you do it. But it's because of your passion of like great content, and how great content drives learning, and how to create that. It's interesting that, I think I know what Joe's answer might be for what to put in the backpack, but we'll have to know. Vern, you were backstage. What did you think when you were hearing all this? Is he muted?
This
Vern.
is funny. Vern's purpose is absolutely a higher purpose.
Yeah, literally.
Vern, can you hear us?
You're on stage now.
Yes,
again,
I can
Vern.
hear you.
Oh,
You're
perfect.
back.
Now we can hear you too.
We hear you
So
too.
Chris,
So
you'll have to restate your question.
Put the tuna sandwich down. Oh, because you hear the cat? Oh, there's a feline creature inches from
I love cats.
I've got one for you. Vern, what do you think about Joe's story about having to have the image so painted in front of you?
Please unmute Chris.
No, he's not muted. I think Vern can't hear you.
Please pass it on.
Vern can't hear you.
Though I don't know. Why don't you restate the question? I guess I'll.
No. I think so. Vern, can you hear me?
I can.
Oh, well, that's lucky.
Yes.
So Chris wants to know, and to the extent that I was listening to Chris, but I was distracted by the cat. He wants to know if you were in alignment with Joe about how people, like the difference between successful people who reach their potential and people who don't ultimately reach it?
It can be
that higher purpose.
Yeah, I mean, having the passion, having the faith in yourself can overcome a lot. I believe that Joe is exactly right when he's saying it's sometimes the difference between success and failure is just so minimal. It can be, some bad weather blows in, you get a little bit of snow. It can be very little things. You forgot to fill up your water bottle when you left camp in the morning, and now you're dehydrated 8 hours later, and now you're not going to make the summit. But if you're passionate and you believe in yourself, you make sure that water bottle is filled up, and you make sure you check the weather, and those things all come together. So some things are out of your control, but you focus on the ones you can, and if you get those right, you succeed.
I might think at first that you starting as a mountain climber and Joe going to the NFL, I might chalk that up to like youthful exuberance or something. But here you are many years later, continuing to succeed. So what keeps that drive going after decades of success? Like, how are you still hungry? How do you stay sharp?
I think the passion is the big thing. I mean, I tried so many other occupations early in life. I bailed out of some lucrative jobs and followed my first love, which is being out in the outdoors and then the mountains. And because I like being in the mountains, I found that after gaining a lot of experience, I like sharing my experience with other people and doing the same thing that I did when I was young. I had to glean a lot of experience and information from the mentors, and now I'm in that position to give back. And I feel that that's really what I do now with my teams, is I share all of my experience and try to give them the insight that they can use on other mountains above and beyond the guiding situation, where they can actually use my experience to progress as a mountaineer.
One of the graphics Joe shows us, because I work at Marketing Profs, is the journey from bottom of the mountain to the top of the mountain and how fraught that journey can be with pitfalls and unforeseen obstacles. So, Joe, do you think that the metaphor is still apt?
Now more than ever, right? Now more than ever. And it is that process that makes it so much fun, right? It's, I tell other people all the time that I don't like to swim, nor do I like to bike, nor do I like to run. I don't do it for fun. I don't like any of it.
Right.
But I certainly like that journey through an Ironman that you're mentally working yourself through, where you want to quit 20 times. And I'm sure Vern has been at this place where it's just, you're like, forget it. And then you round the bend and all of a sudden you're like, I can go all day. You know what I mean? And that's a muscle that you're building. That's a lot like life, right? Life comes at us and it's like, you've got to pick yourself up, and it's so important to build that muscle. And that's why I stay at it, is because failure is part of the process. I just know it's going to happen. I don't like it, but it's part of the process, and that's why I stick at it.
But one interesting thing I know about you, Joe, is that you were training really hard as you possibly could, and you started to see that the results weren't necessarily improving. And at first you're chalking it up like, well, I'm getting older. I guess it's just how it is. Not
Right.
how it is. You were actually pushing yourself too hard. You had to kind of ease back on the throttle if you wanted to progress.
Yeah, I say sleep is the new performance enhancing drug. Recovery wins, right? And it's really important to put in efforts, recover. And my coach would always say, strong like bull, smart like tractor, right? And it's like, Joe, you're strong like a bull, but you're smart like a tractor, and you need to dial it back and know when to take those recovery breaks, so that you can put that effort in and go up a little bit higher, right? And if you just hammer away, pretty soon, in anything we do, right, in any of our jobs, any parts of our life, if you go too hard without recovery, you're not going to get to that next level. Recovery and sleep, the new performance enhancing drug.
You heard it here first. That is a quote. You know, as you were talking about that moment where coach tells you, not NFL, whoo, my belly. And it made me think of that. Well, there's a real documentary and then there's the Disney-fied movie. And the movie was called Fighting with My Family. It was about a brother and sister who were born into a family of wrestling enthusiasts in the UK. And they really, their big life goal was to be in WWE. And so it's the brother's goal since he was 4. And the sister just kind of admired her older brother. And when they finally get the chance to try out in the UK, the brother doesn't get it. He doesn't get invited to go try out further. And the sister, who just kind of went as a lark, did. And then, fighting and brawling and hilarity ensue. But what was interesting was they really portrayed how much struggle it was for the brother to kind of pick up off of that missed goal and all that. In your process for selecting goals going forward, how much of this is still allowing yourself that chance to fail more, or how protected have you become as time goes on?
Yeah, actually, I've let myself fail way more as I've gotten older. You know what I mean? Like when I would miss goals before, I would, it really get to me. And so what Carrie hears me say quite a bit is it's not really about that goal, because you're not any different if your goal is to make $50,000 and you end up at $49,995. Are you as a person that much any different than if you would have got to 50? And so what I say is the goal is a target. It's what happens in your subconscious mind and what goes on behind the scenes that you have to adapt to and grow to, because that goal is in your subconscious mind. So you're doing things along the way that's pushing yourself and failing and all those. So I give myself a lot of leeway to fail in that, and real quick, Chris, to add on to that, and I don't want to take up too much time, but everybody wants to hear, like, oh, when Coach Knox told you you're not good enough to play in the NFL, you went back and you worked harder and you became
right.
That's the story, right? That's the story everybody wants to hear. But that wasn't my story, and those stories are so far and few between. My story was about finding my purpose and my mission and my passion in life. I loved football. I am so happy I am not a professional football player. So happy, right? Took me a few years to figure that out, but that wasn't my purpose, right? And so everybody wants me to tell that other story, oh, then you went back and you told them that wasn't true. And, and hey, that's okay to move away and try a bunch of things to find that mission and purpose.
Absolutely true. It's funny only because 2 hours ago, I just had a conversation with a guy who was looking for a little guidance on something. And I said, I need to pause before I tell you the end of the story to tell you that if you think the next thing I say is, and then I turned it around, that's not what happens. I failed. And boy, did I fail. And it was basically a story of how I just sort of by programming of a live event, because I'm a keynote speaker, they put a guy who like rescued people in an adventure sailboat race ahead of an idiot talking about marketing. You know what you don't do is have me tell a story about how cool Twitter is and email marketing is after a guy said I saved lives. It was ridiculous. All right. We think we might have lost Vern. I don't even know if Vern can hear us, but if so, maybe try to refresh your browser. We'll pretend we maybe did lose Vern. So Vern Tejas is still alive, just on a different mountain than us right now. Joe, one of the things we say at the very end of the show, the backpack, the idea of the backpack is, and Vern would have appreciated this, is that, you have sort of a finite amount of things you can carry. And as going into meetings with your team, if you give them 85 things to follow, they're going to follow one, if any. I start by sticking my 5 things into the backpack: story, collaboration, autonomy, meaning kind of set your environment the way it should, Manchu, which is a Okinawan word that means one family, and execution, because at the end of the day, if it's just talk, it's talk. What can you add to people's backpack today that they should be able to take with them?
Don't be afraid to fail. just please don't. I know it hurts. I know it's painful, but that's where growth lives. And as I say that, I don't want to fail. I don't want to fail tomorrow, the next day. I'm going to do everything possible not to. But you've got to respect that process and be okay with it and embrace it. And it is hard. It is really hard, but do not be afraid to fail.
Vern, how about you? What goes in our very limited space in our backpack? What one thing does somebody need to take with them for the next 5 years to be more successful?
I think self-reliance, build yourself up to the point where you know that if things go wrong, that you can count on yourself to make the right choices. You have to take care of yourself. You have to keep that positive mental outlook. You've got to be resourceful. And yeah, and as Joe just said, you know, we don't get to the top of most of the mountains we try. You know, we turn back a lot. And so that's how we learn. That's how we get better. And so that's where we have to keep trying, keep putting one step in front of the other, and hopefully get to the top.
Jean Molicone stuck in. Molicone, I don't know. Stepped in and said hi, so she's one of your friends, I guess.
And she said, keep those steps going. I really appreciate that. Excellent.
Totally true. That
got more steps in Toto than my whole neighborhood probably this year. So I think we're good.
Carrie, I just realized there was another thing we forgot to tell them about the way the backpack show goes.